2,300 years ago, Alexander the Great invaded Asia, his goal to conquer the Persian Empire. We followed in his footsteps, a 20,000-mile journey from Greece to the plains of India. By the 8th year of the war, Alexander had defeated the peoples of Central Asia. And now he turned towards India, heading for what he believed would be the end of the earth. Our journey now brought us from Afghanistan into the northwest frontier of Pakistan by the Khyber Pass. In the spring of 326 BC, astonished local people would have seen 60,000 Greeks tramping down these hills. We came down into Pakistan in the company of some British train spotters.
No tea.
Or beer.
I could really do with a British rail sandwich at this moment.
We could all do with a beer, never mind a sandwich.
They'd come to see the Khyber Railway, built under the British Empire. I was looking for traces of an older past, but the strategic importance of the Khyber has never changed since the dawn of history. It's always been the main invasion route into India, and the Macedonians crossed it that spring to enter an exotic and mysterious land. In those days, 1,000 years before the coming of Islam, Hindu India began at the Indus. That's where the name comes from. Indian people were a source of rumour and myth to the Greeks. They have the strangest customs on earth, the Greeks said. To Alexander, it must have been simply irresistible. We now followed his track up into the northwest frontier of Pakistan. You can imagine Alexander driving his troops over these passes. 29 now, no longer young. Tough, stocky, hard-bitten little man. His iron constitution not yet wrecked by the wounds, malaria, the drinking bouts, the sexual excess. As he came over these passes, he'll have remembered the words of his tutor Aristotle, who said that from this point it ought to be possible to see the ends of the earth and the great ocean that the Greeks believed surrounded it. Well, Alexander now knew for sure that this was wrong, that vast and densely populated lands lay ahead, and he was driven to see them. The question now becomes not when's he going to stop, but how far can he go? Alexander planned the invasion of India as a two-pronged attack. The main army headed down through Peshawar to the Indus. Alexander himself cut north, perhaps to explore as much as to fight. And there we discovered a living connection with his story. These are the Kalash, the black pagans of the Hindu Kush, a tiny survival in a surrounding sea of Islam. They follow ancient gods and speak a language distantly akin to Greek. The people welcomed Alexander, and they told him an amazing story. They too were worshippers of the Greek god of ecstasy, Dionysus. Alexander had once again hit gold. From his mother's knee, Alexander had been told tales of Dionysus, how he'd been born far out to the east. Now the people took him to sacrifice on the very mountain where they said Dionysus had been born. To Alexander, it was an unmistakable sign that God was here. Alexander joined them, wearing an ivy crown, drunk on their wine, dancing for the god, just as his mother used to do. And today the Kalash add another twist to the tale. They say some of the Greeks stayed on here under one of Alexander's generals, Shalak Shah. They married local women, and we, the Kalash, are their direct descendants. If the story was true, I drank wine that night with the descendants of Alexander's army. Alexander now marched on up the valley of the river Swat. In their thousands, refugees now fled in terror eastwards. They took shelter on a rock fortress high above the Indus Valley, a place the Greeks called Aionos. The rock was said to be impregnable. The Greeks were told that even Hercules had failed to take it when he wandered the earth on his 12 labors. It towered a mile above the river Indus. Its summit, a long curving ridge with enough cultivation to keep 1,000 men busy. Today it's called Pir Sar. There was only one path up which joined the mountain along the ridge from the west. On Pir Sar, Alexander would surpass even himself. We set out to climb Pir Sar in the Macedonians' footsteps. It's a wild region here, and the district officer gave us guides and armed police to drive off wolves and bandits.
Thank you very much.
The path was back-breaking. 5 miles along a narrow saddle, a tortuous trek which Alexander's men did at night with snow still in the gullies. According to the Greeks, their advance guard was led by local guides up onto the rock, and they came on a secret path. And there's only one way that could be, it's this. It comes across this narrow neck of land, which is the only way you can get onto the rock. The ground, as you can see, falls away dramatically on either side, with huge crags on either side. So this must be the route that the Greeks took. As the path got worse and worse, I found myself wondering why he'd bothered. Were the people on top such a threat to him? The only explanation I could come up with was what the Greeks called Alexander's pothos, his desire to surpass even the gods. By nightfall, we'd become separated. Our guides were lost.
We're gonna stop here!
It was pitch dark before we found somewhere to stay, an abandoned mosque used in summer by the shepherds. It's been an absolutely terrible walk. The terrain is just up and down, and even the donkeys could hardly make it. Much worse than crossing the Khawak Pass in the Hindu Kush, in fact. It almost made me believe that they couldn't have come this way. It's so difficult. You couldn't get an army through there. But if they did, if this was the way, then it is the most amazing demonstration of their absolute determination to overcome their enemies. To show the Indian people that there was nowhere to hide, and that all resistance would be futile. Next day, in a chill dawn, we looked down on the Indus from 8,000 feet. At 6 o'clock, after cold water and biscuits, we blearily prepared to carry on. It never ceased to amaze me how Alexander was able to inspire his men. They must have been tough old birds, these Macedonians. That's all I can say. We're nearly there. Come on. At nearly 9,000 feet, we reached the top of the ridge above Pir Sar. To the north, the snow-capped peaks of the Karakoram. Alexander's men now discovered that a deep ravine lay between them and Pir Sar itself, and unbelievable as it may seem, Alexander ordered his troops to bridge it. There was about a 500-yard gap that the Greeks needed to bridge, and one tradition says it took 7 days and 7 nights with the soldiers working in relays. Each soldier had to cut 100 stakes, and the engineers presumably were digging big piles in the side of this space here, and they laid a mat of trees, earth and so on, and it rose higher and higher until maybe more than 100 feet above my head. It must have looked something like one of those trestle railway bridges that you see in the Wild West. And within the week, they'd built the causeway up enough to allow their catapults and artillery to concentrate on the Indian defenders, and then the fate of the rock was sealed. The Indians tried to surrender, but Alexander swept along the ridge and massacred them or drove them off the cliffs. On top, he left an altar to Athena as goddess of victory. Looking out towards the roof of the world, Alexander could reflect he had surpassed even Hercules himself. Back on the Indus, Alexander's engineers had built a huge bridge of boats ready for the crossing. It must have taken them several days. By now the army was like a moving city. There were 64,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, camp followers, women, children, scientists, poets, even entertainers. And the surveyors who were still measuring every step from Greece to the end of the earth. And that was getting closer every day.